We think we know the Middle Ages. Knights, castles, plagues, and very little romance. We picture marriages as cold, hard deals made between families. Love was for poets and troubadours, not for real life. A medieval relationship guide sounds like a joke. Well, it would probably just have one tip survive. But is that true? What if the way they handled things then has something to teach us now? We swipe right, we text, we ghost. We have more ways to connect than ever before. Yet, we often feel more disconnected. Maybe we're missing something fundamental. Something they understood better than we do. Did you know that some medieval women had more legal rights over their property within a marriage than women in the 18th century? Or that the concept of an emotional affair, the kind we struggle with online today, was basically invented by them. They called it courtly love. They wrote letters that took weeks to arrive, forcing them to choose their words carefully. We send 20 texts in an hour and often say nothing at all. What if their focus on contracts and duty wasn't the opposite of love, but the foundation for it? What if their public declarations of commitment held a power we've lost with our casual Facebook official status updates? Let's look past the myths. Let's see what these people who lived and loved 1,000 years ago can tell us about our own relationships today. The answers are not what you expect. Number 21 is a formal contract, the most romantic thing you can do. We see prenups as a sign of distrust. It feels cold, clinical. You're planning for failure before you've even started. It's the opposite of romance. In the Middle Ages, they would have thought the opposite. They'd think starting a life together without a contract was insane. For them, marriage wasn't just about feelings. It was a merger, an alliance of two families, two fortunes, two futures. The contract was everything. This contract wasn't a simple "I do." It was a detailed negotiation. It involved the dowry, the property a woman brought to the marriage, and more importantly, it involved the dower. The dower was the portion of the husband's estate, often a third, that was legally set aside for his wife if he died. This wasn't a gift, it was her, right? The Magna Carta of 1215, the famous document of English liberties, has clauses specifically protecting a widow's right to her dower. This shows how seriously they took it. It was a woman's social security, her protection. The contract laid everything bare. Who owns what? Who gets what if someone dies? Who is responsible for debts? These were not awkward conversations to be had later. They were the first conversation. They believed that building a relationship on a clear, solid, and legally binding foundation was the only way to make it last. It removed a huge source of future conflict. It created security, and here's the modern part. We think talking about money is dirty. We avoid it. A 2018 study by Ramsey Solutions found that money fights are the second leading cause of divorce, right behind infidelity. We enter relationships with huge student loans, credit card debt, and completely different ideas about spending and saving. We pretend it will all work out. Then, 5 years in, we're screaming at each other over a credit card bill. The medieval approach says have that fight before you get married, put it all on the table. Be honest, a prenuptial agreement today does the same thing as a medieval marriage contract. It forces you to have an open, honest discussion about finances. It's not about planning to fail. It's about building a partnership with your eyes wide open. It's about protecting each other. By getting the uncomfortable business out of the way, you create a safe space for the actual relationship, for love and companionship to grow. They understood that financial transparency and security is the bedrock of a stable partnership. We're still learning that lesson. What if we saw financial planning not as a chore, but as an act of love and respect for our partner? If a medieval legal document could provide more security for a woman than centuries of romantic poems, what are our modern promises really worth? And could the most important conversation you have about your future not be about children or dreams, but about debt-to-income ratios? Number 20, do you need to wait for a reply? We live in a world of instant communication. We send a text, we see the 3 little dots. They disappear, we see red, and then nothing. The silence is deafening. A 5-minute delay can feel like an eternity. It can cause real anxiety. We expect instant access and instant answers. This has changed how we relate to each other. We communicate more, but we might be saying less. Think about a relationship in the 12th century. Especially for the nobility or merchants, separation was common. A knight could be on crusade for years. A merchant could be on a trade route for months. The only way to communicate was by letter. A letter was a physical object. It had to be written, which took time and thought. It had to be sealed. It had to be given to a messenger who then had to travel for days or weeks. The journey was dangerous. The messenger could be robbed. The letter could be lost. The Paston family in 15th century England left behind a treasure trove of letters. They give us an incredible look into their lives. Margaret Paston and her husband John were often separated. Their letters are full of business, politics, and managing their estates, but they are also full of personal feelings. They express worry, affection, and a deep sense of partnership. John would write to Margaret for her advice. She would write to him about the children and the challenges she was facing at home. Each letter was an event. You couldn't just dash off a wid. You had to think. What is important enough to say? What does my partner need to know? How can I express my feelings in a way that will last until the next letter arrives? The time lag forced them to be intentional. It forced them to trust. You had to believe that the other person was still there, still thinking of you, even if you hadn't heard from them in a month. We've lost that. The expectation of an instant reply creates a need for constant validation. If my partner doesn't text back right away, are they mad at me? Are they with someone else? The space between communications has collapsed, and with it, so has a certain kind of trust and patience. The medieval tip here is about the value of thoughtful communication. It's about quality over quantity. Maybe we don't need to be in constant contact. Maybe a single, well-thought-out email is more meaningful than 50 texts. It's about trusting the connection even when you can't see the online status. A research from the University of California, Berkeley, suggests that the constant digital tether of our phones can increase stress and decrease relationship satisfaction. Perhaps the old way was better. If you could only send your partner one message a month, what would you say? What do we lose when we trade meaningful communication for constant connection? Could the anxiety of waiting for a text be a modern sickness they never had to endure? Number 19 is your partner, also your business partner. Modern romance is built on feelings, attraction, chemistry, shared interests. We look for a soulmate, someone who completes us. The idea of choosing a partner based on their practical skills seems cold and calculating. We separate love from work. Your job is your job, your relationship is your relationship. In the medieval world, this separation didn't exist for most people. For peasants, artisans, and merchants, the family was an economic unit. The home was the workplace. A marriage was a business partnership. A farmer needed a wife who knew how to manage a garden, tend livestock, spin wool, and run a household. A blacksmith's wife wasn't just a wife. She was often in the forge, managing the accounts, dealing with customers. Her skills were essential to the family's survival and success. A woman's worth on the marriage market was directly tied to her abilities. Could she brew ale? Could she preserve food for the winter? Could she manage servants? These were not secondary considerations. They were primary. This sounds unromantic to us, but it created a powerful kind of interdependence. Husband and wife were a team. They had a shared project, keeping the family fed, housed, and safe. Their success or failure was a joint venture. Look at the Les Ménagères de Paris, a French guide written around 1393 by an elderly husband for his young wife. On the surface, it's a manual on how to be a good wife, but it's also a detailed guide to household management. He's teaching her how to run their estate, manage their finances, and oversee their staff. He wasn't just telling her to be obedient, he was training his business partner. He knew that his own comfort and prosperity depended on her competence. Today, we see a return to this idea, but we call it something else. We call it a power couple. Couples who start a business together, couples who co-create a YouTube channel, or just couples who manage the complex business of a dual income household with kids, mortgages, and investments. The psychologist John Gottman, famous for his research on marital stability, talks about the importance of building shared meaning. This is about creating a life together that has purpose beyond just emotional satisfaction. It's about having a shared mission. The medieval lesson is that a relationship built on shared practical goals can be incredibly strong. When you are working together towards something tangible, it forges a unique bond. It's not just about how you feel about each other in the moment, it's about what you are building together. It's a partnership in the truest sense of the word. If you had to hire your partner for a job, what would it be? In our quest for a soulmate, have we forgotten the importance of a capable teammate? What essential work does your relationship do, and who is responsible for what? Number 18, how public should your love be? We have a lot of ways to make a relationship public. We change our relationship status on social media. We post photos of our partner. We announce our engagement online. It's a click of a button. It feels significant, but it's also easily reversible. It's a soft launch. In the Middle Ages, making a commitment public was a much bigger deal. It was a formal, binding process. The first step was often the betrothal or the handfasting. This wasn't just a private promise. It often happened in front of witnesses at the church door. The couple would declare their intent to marry. They would exchange vows. This was considered legally and spiritually binding. In the eyes of the community and the church, they were essentially married at that point, even if the final wedding ceremony was months or years away. This public declaration had a purpose. It made the relationship real. It told the entire community that these two people were now a unit. The community then became a stakeholder in that relationship's success. Your friends, your family, your neighbors, they all saw the promise being made. This created a social pressure to honor it. You couldn't just ghost someone you were handfasted to. There were serious social and legal consequences. The famous Arnolfini portrait by Jan van Eyck from 1434 is debated by art historians, but one theory is that it depicts a private betrothal ceremony. The couple joins hands. There are witnesses reflected in the mirror. The single candle burning in the chandelier might symbolize the presence of God. Everything about it speaks to a solemn, witnessed, public act. Our modern equivalent, the Facebook official status, is a pale shadow of this. A 2014 study in the journal Cyberpsychology, Behavior, and Social Networking found that people who were more public about their relationship on Facebook reported higher levels of relationship satisfaction. Publicly acknowledging your partner matters. It signals commitment, but the ease with which we can do it and undo it lessens its power. The medieval approach suggests that a strong public declaration is a powerful, stabilizing force. It moves the relationship from a private affair to a public institution. It tells the world, we are in this together. It's not about showing off, it's about creating a circle of accountability around the relationship. When everyone you know has witnessed your commitment, you're more likely to work through the hard times instead of just walking away. What would it look like if announcing a relationship today required witnesses and a public vow? Does the fleeting nature of our online declarations make our commitments weaker? When a relationship is purely private, is it easier to abandon? Number 17, can a gift save your relationship? Gift giving in modern relationships can be tricky. We worry about the cost. We stress about finding the perfect thing. Sometimes it can feel like a commercial obligation, like on Valentine's Day. It can lose its meaning. In the medieval world, gift giving within a relationship was not just a nice gesture. It was a crucial part of the social and emotional fabric. Gifts were a form of communication. They were symbolic, they cemented alliances, demonstrated status, and conveyed feelings that might not be spoken aloud. A knight might give his lady a sleeve or a ribbon to wear during a tournament. This was a public sign of his devotion. She, in turn, was showing her favor. These weren't expensive gifts, they were tokens, but they were loaded with meaning. The exchange was part of the ritual of courtly love, but it went deeper than that. Gifts were also legally significant. The Morgengabe, or morning gift, was a tradition in many Germanic cultures. It was a gift given by the husband to the wife on the morning after their wedding. This wasn't just a romantic surprise, it was a legally recognized transfer of property. The gift became her sole and separate property. She could control it, use it, and pass it on to her children. It was a tangible acknowledgement of her status as his wife and a provision for her financial security. This tells us that for them, a gift was a promise. It was a physical representation of an emotional and legal commitment. Anthropologist Marcel Mauss, in his influential 1925 essay, The Gift, argued that gifts are never free. They create social bonds, obligations, and relationships. The act of giving, receiving, and reciprocating is what builds societies and, by extension, relationships. The modern takeaway is to think about gifts less as consumer products and more as symbols. The value is not in the price tag, it's in the thought and the meaning behind it. A gift can say, I was thinking of you. It can say, I remember what you told me. It can be a tangible link between two people, especially when they are apart. And a study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology found that giving a gift to someone can actually make the giver feel more connected to the receiver. The act itself strengthens the bond. So, the medieval tip is not just to give gifts, but to give gifts with intention. A small, meaningful token can be more powerful than an expensive, thoughtless purchase. It's a way of saying, like, our connection is real, and here is a physical object to prove it. When was the last time you gave a gift that was a pure symbol, with no practical value? What unspoken messages do our gifts send today? Could the tradition of the morning gift be reinvented as a way to establish financial equality from day one of a marriage? Number 16, does your partner need to be your best friend? We have a modern ideal. Your romantic partner should be everything. Your lover, your co-parent, your therapist, your financial advisor, and above all, your best friend. We put an enormous amount of pressure on one person to fulfill all of our emotional needs. When they fall short, we feel disappointed. A medieval person would find this idea very strange. They had a much more communal view of life. Your spouse was your partner in life and work. But your emotional support system was much wider. You had your family, you had your neighbors, you had the church community, you had your godparents, godsibs, the origin of the word gossip. Women had their circle of other women. Men had their guild or their fellow soldiers. Your spouse was not expected to be your sole source of emotional intimacy. This doesn't mean marriages were loveless, but it means the relationship wasn't burdened with unrealistic expectations. A wife might share her deepest fears and worries with her sister or a close female neighbor. A man might talk about his troubles with his brother or friends at the tavern. This was normal. Christine de Pizan, a remarkable writer in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, wrote The Book of the City of Ladies. It's a powerful defense of women. In it, she describes a world where women support each other, educate each other, and provide emotional strength for one another. Her own relationship with her husband was, by all accounts, a happy and loving one. But her writings also show the immense value she placed on her relationships with other women. The modern sociologist Eli Finkel, in his book The All or Nothing Marriage, talks about this very issue. And he argues that in the past, marriage was primarily about practical needs. Now, we expect it to be a vehicle for self-discovery and personal fulfillment. This can lead to great marriages, he says, but it also makes bad marriages feel much worse. The pressure is immense. The medieval model suggests a healthier approach might be to diversify our emotional portfolio. It's okay, and even necessary, to have deep, meaningful, intimate friendships outside of your romantic partnership. It doesn't take away from your relationship, it can actually strengthen it. It provides a safety valve. It gives you other sources of support, so you're not putting all that weight on one person. It allows your partner to be human, not a superhero who has to meet every single one of your needs. Who do you talk to when you can't talk to your partner? Have we made our romantic relationships more fragile by trying to make them our everything? Could the secret to a happy marriage be having a few other best friends? Number 15, should you idolize your partner? We're often told to be realistic in our relationships. Nobody's perfect. Love isn't a fairy tale. But what if a little bit of idealization is actually a good thing? This is where we can learn from one of the most famous and misunderstood medieval concepts, courtly love. Courtly love was an idea that emerged in the high courts of France in the 11th and 12th centuries, heavily promoted by figures like Eleanor of Aquitaine. It was a literary and cultural phenomenon. In the classic version, a knight would devote himself to a noble lady who was usually married to someone else. He would perform great deeds in her honor. He would write poetry for her. He would suffer for her. The love was intense, all-consuming, and almost always unconsummated. To us, this sounds like a recipe for frustration or an emotional affair. But the point of courtly love wasn't really about the other person. It was about self-improvement. The lady was an ideal. She was a symbol of virtue, beauty, and grace. By striving to be worthy of her, the knight was supposed to become a better man. More chivalrous, more noble, more refined, the love was a transformative force. It was aspirational. This is a stark contrast to our modern focus on authenticity. We want our partners to love us for who we really are, flaws and all, and that's important. But the courtly love tradition suggests that there's also value in seeing the best version of our partner and being inspired by it. Modern psychology actually backs this up. A 2011 study led by Sandra Murray, a prominent relationship researcher, found that positive illusions about one's partner are linked to higher relationship satisfaction and stability. In other words, people who idealize their partners a little bit, who see them as slightly better than they see themselves, tend to have happier, longer lasting relationships. It's not about being blind to their flaws. It's about focusing on their strengths. It's about seeing their potential and being inspired by it. When you hold a positive, even slightly idealized view of your partner, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You treat them better, they in turn feel more loved and appreciated and may start to live up to your positive expectations. It's a virtuous cycle. The medieval knights were onto something. Loving an ideal can push both you and your partner to become better people. Do you see your partner as they are or as they could be? Is there a danger in being too realistic about the person you love? Can a little bit of fantasy actually make a relationship stronger? Number 14 is conflict a feature, not a bug. We tend to see conflict in a relationship as a sign of trouble. We think a happy couple is one that never fights. We strive for harmony. We avoid difficult conversations. When arguments happen, we think something is wrong with us, our partner or the relationship itself. The medieval world was full of conflict. It was a violent, litigious, and contentious society. From peasant land disputes to baronial rebellions, conflict was a part of daily life. They didn't see it as something to be avoided at all costs. They saw it as something to be managed. They had systems for it: manorial courts, church courts, trial by ordeal, trial by combat. The goal wasn't to eliminate conflict, but to contain it and resolve it according to a set of rules. This mindset extended to marriage. Marital disputes were common, and the community often got involved. A priest might be called in to mediate. Neighbors might intervene in a case of domestic abuse, sometimes with a ritualized shaming of the abuser called a charivari or skimmington ride. The law recognized that marriages would have problems. There were legal grounds for separation, though divorce, as we know, it was nearly impossible. The point is, they had a framework for dealing with inevitable conflict. One of the most surprising sources is the body of medieval fabliaux, short, comical, and often raunchy stories popular in France. Many of them feature husbands and wives trying to outwit each other. They are full of arguments, tricks, and infidelity. While they're exaggerated for comic effect, they show a culture that was comfortable with the idea that marriage is a battle of wills. It's not a peaceful garden, it's a dynamic, sometimes confrontational relationship. Modern relationship experts like John Gottman agree. He says it's not the presence of conflict that predicts divorce, but how a couple handles it. His research at the Love Lab at the University of Washington showed that happy couples argue just as much as unhappy couples. The difference is that happy couples have a repair mechanism. They can de-escalate. They can apologize, they can use humor, they see conflict as a way to understand each other better and solve problems. Unhappy couples get stuck in negative patterns: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. The medieval tip is to reframe how we see conflict. It's not a sign of failure. It's an inevitable part of two different people trying to build a life together. The goal isn't to avoid fights. The goal is to learn how to fight well, to fight with respect, to listen, and to find a way back to each other afterward. Conflict is a feature of a real relationship, not a bug. What are the unwritten rules of engagement for arguments in your relationship? Do you fight to win, or do you fight to solve the problem? Could embracing conflict rather than fearing it actually make your relationship more resilient? Number 13, should you trust a third party? When we have a problem in our relationship, our first instinct is to keep it private. We think it's our business and nobody else's. Bringing in a third party feels like a failure. It feels like airing our dirty laundry. We especially resist the idea of any kind of formal mediation like couples therapy until things are at a breaking point. A medieval couple would not have had this obsession with privacy. Their lives were deeply embedded in their community. Their marriage was a public institution, and the community felt it had a stake in its success. When a serious dispute arose, it was natural to involve a third party. This could be the village priest. As the spiritual leader of the community, he was often a trusted counselor and mediator. He would hear confessions, which gave him insight into the private lives of his parishioners. He could offer guidance based on religious teachings and moral principles. His goal was reconciliation, to preserve the sanctity of the marriage and the stability of the community. It could also be the lord of the manor or a respected village elder. These figures had secular authority. They could arbitrate disputes over property or inheritance, which were often at the root of marital problems. Their judgment carried weight. To defy it would mean risking your social standing. This wasn't about gossip. It was about governance. The medieval world understood that a troubled marriage could destabilize the community. It could lead to feuds between families, disputes over land, and social disorder. So they had built in accepted systems for third-party intervention. It wasn't seen as a last resort, it was part of how the system was supposed to work. The records of manorial courts from the 13th and 14th centuries are filled with cases of neighbors reporting on each other and the court stepping in to resolve domestic issues. We have modern equivalent couples counseling, but we often treat it with suspicion. We think it means our relationship is doomed. The medieval perspective suggests we should see it differently. It's not a sign of failure, it's a wise and practical step. It's bringing in a neutral, respected third party to help manage conflict. A therapist, like a priest or an elder, can offer a different perspective. They can teach communication skills. They can help a couple navigate a difficult issue without destroying the relationship. According to the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, over 90% of clients who undergo therapy report an improvement in their emotional health. The process works. The medieval lesson is to destigmatize getting help. A relationship is too important to be left to just two people, especially when they are struggling. Who is the village elder in your life that you could turn to for relationship advice? Why do we value professional advice for our finances and health, but not for our relationships? If therapy were a normal, expected part of every long-term relationship, how many breakups could be prevented? Number 12, do you have to live in each other's pockets? The modern ideal of a couple is one of constant togetherness. We're supposed to share hobbies, share friends, and spend all our free time together. We value quality time above all else. When partners want to do things separately, it can sometimes be seen as a red flag. Are they drifting apart? In many medieval households, particularly those of the aristocracy and gentry, husbands and wives lived surprisingly separate lives. The castle or manor house was divided into male and female spheres. The lord had his great hall, his hunting parties, his business with other men. The lady had her solar, her private chambers, where she would be with her ladies-in-waiting, doing embroidery, managing the household, and raising the younger children. This wasn't a sign of a bad marriage, it was just the structure of their world. Men and women had different roles and therefore different social lives. They would come together for meals, for official functions, and in the bedroom. But their day-to-day existence was often quite separate. The 14th century Luttrell Psalter, a famous illuminated manuscript, shows scenes of daily life. We see Sir Geoffrey Luttrell at his dinner table with his family, but we also see scenes of agricultural work and other activities where men and women have distinct roles. This separation gave them a degree of autonomy. It allowed them to have their own social networks and their own areas of expertise. The wife was not just an appendage to her husband. She was the ruler of her own domestic domain. He might be the lord of the manor, but she was the lady of the household. This is not to say we should go back to rigid gender roles, but the underlying principle is surprisingly modern and relevant. Relationship experts today often talk about the importance of maintaining a sense of self within a partnership. The psychologist Esther Perel argues that desire and intimacy require a certain amount of distance. Fire needs air, she says. If two people merge completely, there is no space for attraction and mystery. The medieval model, born of social necessity, shows that a strong partnership doesn't require constant togetherness. It's healthy to have separate hobbies, separate friends, and time apart. It allows you to be an individual, to bring new energy and experiences back into the relationship. It prevents the kind of codependency that can suffocate a partnership over time. The key is that while they had separate spheres, they were working towards a common purpose, the success and prosperity of their lineage and household. It was autonomy within a framework of unity. Does your relationship have enough air to breathe? Do you feel guilty for wanting time to yourself, away from your partner? Could a little more separation actually bring you closer together? Number 11 is love, a sickness you need to cure. We talk about love in grand, positive terms. It's a beautiful thing. It's what everyone is searching for. But we also have another darker way of talking about it. We are lovesick. We fall madly in love. We feel a burning passion. This language hints at something uncontrollable, something that feels like an illness. The medieval world took this idea very literally. Medical writers and philosophers often classified intense romantic love, what they called amor heroes, or heroic love, as a genuine disease. They treated it like any other malady with diagnoses and prescribed cures. It was seen as a form of melancholy, an imbalance of the body's humors caused by an obsessive fixation on a single person. The 11th century physician Constantine the African wrote about it in his medical texts. He described the symptoms loss of appetite, insomnia, a racing pulse, weeping, and obsessive thoughts about the beloved. Does that sound familiar? It's the classic description of intense infatuation. His prescribed cures included listening to music, engaging in conversation with friends, travel, and, if all else failed, sexual intercourse either with the object of desire or someone else to release the tension. This might seem comical to us, but it's based on a profound insight. They recognize that this kind of overwhelming obsessive infatuation is not a stable or healthy state to be in long term. It's a temporary madness, it's a fever that will eventually break. By classifying it as a sickness, they were distinguishing it from the more stable, companionate love that a long-term marriage required. They were saying, this crazy feeling you have right now, it's powerful, it's real, but it's not the whole story of love. Modern science has actually come to a similar conclusion. The anthropologist Helen Fisher has done extensive research on the brain in love. Using fMRI scans, she found that the state of early, intense romantic love activates the brain's reward system, the same areas that light up for addiction. It's a powerful cocktail of dopamine and norepinephrine. It creates feelings of euphoria, craving, and obsession. It really is like a drug. But, as Fisher notes, this state doesn't last. It evolves over time into a calmer, more stable form of attachment driven by hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin. The medieval doctors were right. Love sickness is a real neurological phenomenon. And their advice to distract yourself, to rely on your social network, to seek balance is surprisingly good. They remind us not to build our entire future on a feeling that is, by its very nature, temporary. Have we confused the temporary fever of infatuation with the lifelong commitment of love? If we treated the early stages of a romance like a temporary illness, would we make better long-term decisions? What is the cure for a broken heart, and did medieval doctors know it better than we do? Number 10. What is your relationship's reputation? In the age of social media, we are obsessed with our personal brand, but we don't often think about our relationship brand. We see our partnership as a private affair. How others perceive it seems secondary to how it actually feels on the inside. In the Middle Ages, reputation was everything, and that included the reputation of your marriage. A good marriage was seen as a sign of a well-ordered, godly household. A bad marriage, full of public conflict, infidelity, or mismanagement, could damage the social standing of both partners. It wasn't just a personal failing, it was a public one. A woman's honor and a man's ability to govern his household were constantly under public scrutiny. Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, written in the late 14th century, is filled with characters who are deeply concerned with reputation. The wife of Bath, for example, is a master of public relations. She carefully manages her image to maintain her independence and status through 5 different marriages. This concern for reputation acted as a powerful social control. It encouraged couples to resolve their differences, to present a united front, and to live up to the social ideal of a good partnership. Of course, this had a dark side. It could trap people in unhappy marriages and prioritize appearance over reality. But it also had a positive effect. It reminded couples that their relationship was part of a larger social fabric and that their actions had consequences beyond their own private happiness. Today, we've lost much of that community oversight. But the idea of a relationship having a public reputation is still relevant. Think about the couples, some of them just seem to work. They are a team. They speak well of each other. They are the friends you go to for advice. They have a good relationship brand. Other couples are known for their drama. They fight in public. They complain about each other to friends. Their reputation is one of instability. Research by psychologist Benjamin Carney at UCLA has shown how stress from outside the relationship, like from work or finances, can spill over and damage the partnership. In the same way, a good public reputation can create a positive feedback loop. When your friends and family see you as a strong, stable couple, they are more likely to offer support. Their belief in your relationship can actually help you through tough times. The medieval tip is to be mindful of your relationship's reputation. How do you and your partner present yourselves to the world? Do you build each other up or tear each other down in front of others? This isn't about being fake. It's about recognizing that your partnership has a public face and that nurturing a reputation for unity, respect, and stability can actually make the relationship stronger from the inside out. If your relationship was a brand, what would its slogan be? How do the stories you tell others about your partner shape your own perception of them? Could consciously building a positive couple reputation act as a buffer against hard times? Number 9, can you forgive the unforgivable? Our culture has a complex relationship with forgiveness. On the one hand, we see it as a virtue. On the other hand, we live in a cancel culture where one mistake can lead to permanent social exile. In relationships, especially when it comes to infidelity, forgiveness can feel impossible. A betrayal of trust can seem like an absolute endpoint. The medieval world was in many ways a much harsher place, but its theological framework, centered on Christian concepts of sin, confession, penance, and redemption, gave them a powerful and structured model for forgiveness. They believed that all people were sinners, everyone falls short. The possibility of forgiveness was therefore built into the very fabric of their worldview. This applied to marriage as well. While infidelity was a serious sin with legal and social consequences, the church's ultimate goal was always reconciliation. The sacrament of confession was a key tool. A person could confess their sin to a priest, receive a penance and act to show they were sorry, and then be granted absolution. This process provided a clear step-by-step path back from a transgression. It didn't erase what happened, but it offered a way forward. One of the most famous stories of medieval forgiveness is that of King Henry II of England and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine. Theirs was a famously tumultuous relationship, full of political conflict and infidelity on Henry's part, most famously with Rosamund Clifford. Eleanor eventually led a rebellion against him with their sons, and he imprisoned her for 16 years. Yet, after his death, Eleanor did not act with pure vengeance. She worked to secure the throne for their son Richard and later for their son John. She worked to preserve the kingdom they had built together. It was a form of pragmatic political forgiveness rooted in a shared legacy. Modern psychology is catching up to this ancient wisdom. Studies by researchers like Everett Worthington have shown that forgiveness is a powerful tool for both mental and physical health. Forgiveness is not about condoning the other person's actions. It's not about forgetting what happened. It's about letting go of the anger and resentment that harms you. In a relationship, it's about making a conscious decision that the partnership is more important than the grievance. The medieval model, with its clear steps of acknowledging the wrong confession, making amends penance, and being accepted back absolution, provides a useful template. It's a structured process. Like, forgiveness isn't just a feeling that magically appears. It's a choice and a process. It requires the person who did wrong to take responsibility and the person who was wronged to be willing to find a path forward. Can a relationship truly survive a major betrayal without a formal process for forgiveness? What does a modern penance look like? Is our inability to forgive a sign of our high standards or a weakness in our capacity for long-term love? Number 8, who is really in charge? We officially believe in egalitarian relationships. We think of partnership as a 50-50 split. The medieval world, on the surface, was the complete opposite. It was a rigid patriarchy. The man was the head of the household. The wife was legally and socially subordinate to her husband. This is the standard picture, and it's largely true. But if you look closer, the reality was much more complicated. While the husband held the formal authority, the wife often wielded enormous informal power. She was the manager of the household, a complex and vital enterprise. This was not just housework. She was in charge of supplies, food production, textiles, managing servants, and the family's health. In a noble household, she could be responsible for 100 people. Her competence was the difference between a prosperous, well-run estate and a chaotic, failing one. This gave her significant de facto power. The husband might be the CEO, but she was the COO. He was responsible for the foreign policy of the family, war, politics, legal matters. She was responsible for the domestic policy. A smart man understood that he needed to rely on his wife's skills and judgment. As the saying went, he might be the head, but she was the neck that turned the head. We see this clearly in the letters of Margaret Paston in the 15th century. While her husband John was away in London on legal business, she ran their Norfolk estates. She dealt with violent neighbors, managed tenants, hired lawyers, and defended their property. She wrote to her husband for instructions, but she also gave him firm advice and often acted on her own initiative. Theirs was a partnership where formal hierarchy coexisted with practical, shared authority. The modern lesson here is about the difference between formal titles and real influence. In our relationships, we can get hung up on who is right or who is the pants. We can fight over a 50-50 split in chores or finances. The medieval model suggests a different way of looking at it. It's about spheres of influence. It's about recognizing and respecting each other's areas of expertise. Maybe one partner is better at managing money, maybe the other is better at planning social events or dealing with the kids' school. Instead of fighting for a perfectly equal division of every single task, a stronger approach can be to divide and conquer. Let each person take the lead in the areas where they are most skilled. This isn't about patriarchy, it's about efficiency and mutual respect. It's a partnership based on competence, not just a rigid ideology of equality. What are the unofficial spheres of influence in your relationship? Do you value your partner's competence in areas where you are weak? Could letting go of a strict 50-50 mindset actually create a more balanced and effective partnership? Number 7 is a little humor the best medicine. When we think of the Middle Ages, we don't usually think of laughter. We think of a grim, serious, and devout time. But that's not the full picture. Their literature, their art, and even the margins of their religious manuscripts are filled with humor, satire, and bawdy jokes. They understood the power of laughter to make life bearable. This extended to relationships. While much of the official writing about marriage was serious and moralizing, the popular culture was full of stories that poked fun at the conflicts and absurdities of married life. The fabliaux, as mentioned before, are a prime example. They are full of cheating wives, foolish husbands, and mischievous priests. They are the medieval equivalent of a modern sitcom. They took the everyday tensions of relationships and turned them into comedy. Chaucer's The Miller's Tale is a masterpiece of this genre. It's a complex and hilarious story of a young wife, her old husband, and the 2 clerks trying to seduce her. It's rude, clever, and very funny. By laughing at these situations, people could release some of the tension around sensitive subjects like sex, jealousy, and the power dynamics between men and women. Humor was a safety valve. Modern research overwhelmingly supports the importance of humor in relationships. A 2017 study from the University of Kansas found that the more that couples laughed together, the more satisfied they were in their relationship. It's not just about telling jokes. It's about having a shared sense of humor. It's about being able to laugh at yourselves and at the absurd situations that life throws at you. And John Gottman's research also highlights humor as a key repair mechanism during conflict. A well-timed, gentle joke can de-escalate a tense argument. It can break the cycle of negativity and remind a couple that they are on the same team. It's a sign of emotional intelligence and a strong bond. The medieval world, for all its seriousness, understood this. They knew that life was hard and marriage was challenging. A shared sense of humor was not a luxury, it was a survival tool. It was a way to navigate the inevitable frustrations of living with another person. The ability to laugh together, especially during hard times, is a profound sign of a resilient and healthy partnership. When was the last time you and your partner had a really good laugh together? Do you use humor to connect and de-escalate or to mock and wound? Could the raunchy jokes of a 700-year-old poem teach us more about marital happiness than a modern self-help book? Number 6, do you know your partner's job? In our modern specialized world, it's very common for partners to have little real understanding of what the other person does for a living. One person is a software engineer, the other is a nurse. They might know the job title, but they don't know the daily stresses, the specific skills involved, or the internal politics of the workplace. Their work lives are black boxes to each other. For the vast majority of medieval people, this was not the case. As we saw, the family was an economic unit. The work was shared, and it happened in or near the home. A farmer's wife knew exactly what her husband did all day because she was often in the fields with him or managing the parts of the farm that he wasn't. The wife of a baker, a weaver, or a candlestick maker lived above the shop. She saw the customers, she knew the suppliers, she understood the rhythms of the business. This created a deep, practical understanding of each other's lives. When her husband came home exhausted and frustrated, she knew why. She knew that the grain price had fallen or that a key piece of equipment had broken. When she was overwhelmed with her work, he understood the pressure she was under. Their daily struggles were shared. This level of understanding fosters a powerful kind of empathy. It's hard to be resentful of your partner's long hours when you know exactly what they are doing and why it's important for the family's survival. This shared economic life was the foundation of their partnership. The 13th century German law code, the Saxonspiegel, has illustrations showing husbands and wives working together in various trades, a clear indication of this integrated life. Today, we try to bridge this gap by talking about our day, but it's not the same. The tip here is to make a real effort to understand your partner's work life. Don't just ask, "How was your day?" Ask specific questions. What is the hardest problem that you are trying to solve right now? Who is the most difficult person you have to deal with? What is one thing you wish I understood about your job? Some couples find creative ways to do this. They might visit each other's workplace. They might read a book or watch a documentary about their partner's fields. The goal is to move from a vague, abstract knowledge to a more concrete, empathetic understanding. When you truly appreciate the challenges and triumphs of your partner's professional world, you strengthen the foundation of your personal one. If you had to do your partner's job for a week, how well would you do? What is the biggest stress in your partner's work life that you don't fully understand? Could a take your spouse to work day be more valuable than a dozen date nights? Number 5 is love built on duty. Duty is not a very popular word in modern romance. It sounds like a chore. It sounds like the opposite of passion and spontaneity. We believe that love should be based on feelings and free choice. We do things for our partner because we want to, not because we have to. If it starts to feel like an obligation, we think the love is gone. The medieval mindset was the complete reverse. For them, love was a duty. Marriage was a sacrament, a vow made before God. You had a duty to your spouse, your family, and your community to uphold that vow. This sense of duty was the container. The feelings of love and affection were expected to grow within that container, but the container itself was what held everything together, especially during hard times. This idea of duty was woven into their legal and religious systems. The marriage debt was a real concept. It was the mutual obligation of both spouses to be sexually available to each other. This sounds very cold to us, but the underlying principle, as articulated by theologians like Thomas Aquinas, was that this was part of the commitment you made. It was a duty to each other intended to strengthen the marital bond and keep both partners from the sin of lusting after others. This sense of duty provided immense stability. When you feel like leaving, when you are angry, when the feelings of love have faded, duty is what keeps you at the table. It's the force that makes you keep trying. It's the belief that the commitment itself has value separate from your fluctuating daily emotions. It's the long view. This is not to say we should go back to a world of loveless, duty-bound marriages. But perhaps we have swung too far in the other direction. We rely almost entirely on feelings. And feelings are notoriously fickle. They come and go. A relationship built only on the shifting sands of emotion is a fragile one. The modern psychologist and author M. Scott Peck, in his book The Road Less Traveled, makes a powerful distinction between the feeling of falling in love and the act of true love. He argues that true love is not a feeling, but an action. It's an act of the will. It's a commitment to nurture another person's growth. It is, in essence, a duty. It's choosing to love your partner even on the days when you don't feel like it. The medieval tip is to reclaim the word duty in our relationships. See it not as a burden, but as the strong, steady foundation upon which a lasting love can be built. It's the promise you keep even when it's hard. And often it is through the consistent, disciplined action of duty that the feelings of love are rekindled. What is one duty in your relationship that you perform even when you don't feel like it? If feelings are the weather, could duty be the house that shelters the relationship from the storm? Has our focus on romantic feelings made us less resilient partners? Number 4, does your legacy depend on your partner? We tend to think of our lives and careers in individualistic terms. We want to make our mark on the world. We build our own personal legacy. Our relationship is part of our life, but it's often seen as separate from our life's work. In the medieval world, especially for the nobility and the merchant class, this was not the case. Your legacy was your family. It was your lineage. It was the land, the title, the business that you would pass on to your children. And you could not do that alone. Your spouse was your essential partner in this multi-generational project. The choice of a spouse was the most important strategic decision a person could make. A good marriage could elevate a family's status, increase its wealth, and secure its future. A bad marriage could ruin it. The entire point of the partnership was to produce heirs and to pass on a family's legacy in a stronger position than when you found it. This was a shared, all-consuming goal. Think of William the Conqueror and his wife Matilda of Flanders. Their marriage in the 1050s was a brilliant political alliance. It gave William a powerful ally in his bid for the English throne. Together, they had at least 9 children, including 2 future kings. Their partnership literally shaped the future of England. Their legacy was a joint venture. He won the battles, but she served as regent in Normandy, governing in his absence, and providing stability he needed to pursue his ambitions. This focus on a shared long-term legacy gave their relationships a powerful sense of purpose. It wasn't just about their personal happiness in the here and now, it was about what they were building for the future. It was about being part of a story that was bigger than themselves. We can apply this idea today, even if we're not trying to secure a royal dynasty. What is the legacy your relationship is building? It might not be a kingdom, but it could be a family. It could be the values you instill in your children. It could be a business you build together. It could be a creative project. It could be the positive impact you have on your community as a couple. When a couple has a shared mission, a common purpose that extends beyond their own relationship, it creates a powerful bond. It aligns their goals, it gives meaning to their daily struggles, it helps them weather conflicts because they know they are working towards something more important than their individual disagreements. It answers the question, what is this all for? What are you and your partner building together that will outlast you? If your relationship ended tomorrow, what would its shared legacy be? Could defining a common mission be the most important step in securing a long-term partnership? Number 3, are you prepared for winter? We live with an expectation of perpetual summer in our relationships. We want the passion and excitement of the beginning to last forever. When we hit a difficult patch, a winter season, we panic. We think the love is gone. We think the relationship has failed. We are not prepared for the natural, cyclical nature of a long-term partnership. The medieval world ran on seasons. Their entire existence was dictated by the agricultural calendar. There was the planting in the spring, the growing in the summer, the harvest in the fall, and the long, cold, difficult period of winter. They knew that winter was inevitable. It was not a surprise. It was not a sign of failure. It was a part of the cycle of life. The key was to prepare for it. During the harvest, they worked incredibly hard to store up enough grain, preserve enough food, and chop enough wood to survive the winter. Their survival depended on their foresight and their labor during the seasons of abundance. They didn't expect to be frolicking in the fields in January. They expected to be huddled by the fire, living off what they had stored and waiting for the spring. This provides a powerful metaphor for relationships. Every long-term relationship will have its winters. These can be caused by external factors like job loss, illness, or the stress of raising young children. They can also be internal periods of boredom, disconnection, or conflict. The medieval lesson is not to fear the winter, but to prepare for it. How do you do that? You store up goodwill during the good times. You invest in the relationship when it's easy. You create shared positive memories. You practice good communication skills. You build a strong foundation of trust and respect. This is your storehouse for the winter. When things get hard, you can draw on that reservoir of shared history and mutual respect. The illustrated manuscripts known as Les Tres Riches Heures du Duc de Berry, created in the early 15th century, beautifully depict the seasons. The summer months show nobles courting and peasants working in sunny fields. The February page shows a stark winter scene. The peasants are huddled inside, warming themselves by a fire. The landscape is covered in snow. It's a realistic acknowledgement that life has both warmth and coldness. A relationship that is only prepared for summer will shatter at the first frost. A resilient relationship, like a medieval farming household, accepts that winter is coming and uses the good times to prepare. It understands that the goal is not to live in an endless summer, but to have the strength and resources to survive the winter together, knowing that spring will eventually return. What provisions are you storing in your relationship's storehouse during the good times? When your relationship last went through a winter, were you prepared for it? Does our romantic ideal of a perpetual honeymoon leave us dangerously unequipped for the reality of a lifelong partnership? Number 2, is consent a promise you make every day? The concept of consent in medieval marriage is deeply troubling to our modern minds. Legally, a wife was considered her husband's property. The concept of marital rape did not exist. A wife's consent to sex was assumed to have been given once and for all at the wedding ceremony. This is a dark and undeniable part of their world. However, there is a surprising and more nuanced idea that existed alongside this brutal legal reality. It comes from the church and the development of marriage as a sacrament, right? In the 12th century, theologians like Peter Lombard and Gratian were instrumental in establishing that the one essential ingredient for a valid marriage was the free and willing consent of both the man and the woman. This was a radical idea. It meant that a marriage forced upon someone by their parents was, in the eyes of the church, not a true marriage. Of course, the social pressure to consent was immense, but the principle was established: a marriage must be founded on an initial act of free will. The I will spoken at the wedding ceremony was seen as a sacred and binding promise given freely. Let's take that core idea that the foundation of the union is a free and ongoing act of will and look at it through a modern lens. We give our consent on our wedding day. But what if we saw consent not as a one-time event, but as a promise that needs to be renewed every day? The medieval person's life was governed by vows. A knight's vow to his lord, a monk's vow to his order, and a spouse's vow to their partner. A vow wasn't just a promise, it was an identity. You didn't just make a vow, you lived it. It had to be actively upheld. The modern tip inspired by this is to treat our relationship as a choice we make every single day. We don't stay because we're trapped. We stay because we choose to. We are actively consenting to the partnership, day in and day out. This reframes the relationship from a state of being into an active process. This idea is at the heart of the work of many modern therapists. It's about intentionality. Are you actively choosing your partner today? Are you living out the promise you made? This mindset can be transformative. It shifts the focus from "I'm stuck in this" to "I am choosing this." It gives both partners a sense of agency and responsibility. It makes the relationship a living, breathing thing that is co-created every day, not a static contract signed years ago. It's a way of taking the best of the medieval idea, the profound power of a freely given vow, and shedding the worst of it. It's consent as a continuous active promise. Aside from the initial "I do," how do you give your consent to your relationship on a daily basis? What would change if you woke up each morning and consciously chose your partner again? Is the greatest freedom in a relationship the knowledge that you are both free to leave, but choose to stay? Number 1, what do you do after the story ends? Our love stories have a standard plot. Boy meets girl, they face obstacles. They overcome them, they get married, and the story ends, and they lived happily ever after. Fairy tales, romantic comedies, novels, they almost all stop at the wedding or the triumphant reunion. We have 1,000 stories about how to fall in love, and almost none about how to stay in love. The medieval world also had its epic love stories. Tristan and Isolde is one of the most famous. It's a passionate, tragic tale of adulterous love, a magic potion, and a love so powerful it leads to death. It's the prototype for all the doomed romance stories that followed, but these stories, like ours, were fantasies. They were about the thrill of transgression, not the reality of a lifelong partnership. But medieval people had another kind of story. They had the lives of the saints. These were the stories they told over and over again, and many of them were about married saints. Think of Saint Monica, the mother of Saint Augustine. Her story is not about falling in love. It's about decades of patient, persistent love for a difficult husband and a wayward son. It's a story of endurance, of faith, of a love that is defined by its steadfastness over a lifetime. Or consider the story of Saint Elizabeth of Hungary. She was a princess married for political reasons who grew to deeply love her husband Louis. Their story is one of a partnership built on shared faith and mutual respect. But the story doesn't end when they get married. It continues through the birth of their children, his departure for the Crusades, and his eventual death from a fever. The most famous part of her story is what she did after he was gone. She became a protector of the poor, building a hospital where she herself tended to the sick. Her love for her husband was transformed into a love for humanity. These stories provided a different script. They suggested that the wedding is not the end of the story, but the beginning of the real work. They showed that love is not just a passionate feeling, but a practice of virtue over a lifetime. It's about loyalty, patience, forgiveness, and service. And most importantly, they provided a model for what happens after the happily ever after: sickness, loss, grief, and death. We are terrified of endings. We don't want to think about our partner getting old, getting sick, or dying. Our romantic stories ignored this reality. The medieval world, where death was a constant presence, could not afford this luxury. Their stories and their faith prepared them for the full arc of a life and a relationship, including its inevitable end. The tip is to look beyond the falling in love part of the story. It's to ask, what is our story about endurance? About care and sickness? About how we will face loss together? It's about building a love that is strong enough for the whole story, right up to the final chapter. If your relationship were a story, what would the chapter after happily ever after be called? How does a partnership prepare for the inevitable challenges of aging, illness, and loss? What is the purpose of a great love once the passion of youth has faded?